Hey everyone, Zion over here from Nintendo Life. Unfortunately, there's a problem currently, and if you can believe it, it has to do with the Nintendo Switch. Now, this problem, it may surprise some of you, but some of you may know the answer to this already. And the problem is Chrono Trigger, one of the best RPGs ever made, is not available on the Switch. Gosh, what a crime. To make this problem hopefully better, I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if I just came together with some people and we just talked about the game? Maybe got more people to look it up than maybe that have never played it before. Maybe get Square Enix to finally reconsider and release this darn beautiful game on the Switch. So today, I'm joined by John Cartwright.
Hey, that's me. Hey! I've got a little thing to admit too.
Oh?
I was searching on our channel for Chrono Trigger videos, and this channel has existed for 15 years. It was mostly trailer uploads to begin with, and then Alex came in and did edited videos. But in the entire 15-year duration of the channel, we've never done one Chrono Trigger video.
Not a single one. Not a single
one.
One? Not even two. So we've talked about Chrono Trigger before, right? But no.
I think we featured it in like a Super Nintendo list or something. But that was like user voted. We've never put our input of Chrono Trigger into a video before. Ever.
For how many lists I feel like Chrono Trigger makes it into, I'm glad that we're finally getting this done. We could pretend this is the most requested Nintendo Life video out there. I'm fine with that.
People are sending me letters every day, physical letters.
This little indie game that, not a lot of people have heard about, Square Enix, small company, really tiny. Really needs to get a few more eyes on it.
Exactly. And of course, by the way, if you happen to hear that, which I really hope you did, we're also joined by the wonderful Kevin Kenson.
This is now that I realize I haven't been recording, so no, they didn't hear that. No, they heard it. Yeah, hi. Funny enough, even though my channel is not focused on game content as much as I'm going to start focusing it more, even though it's all like hardware and accessory most of the time, I do have a Chrono Trigger video.
Do you really?
You're way better than we are.
It's
We've failed, you've succeeded.
I thought you were about to tell us that like it may seem like you've never played Chrono Trigger before because you've never made a Chrono Trigger video, and you just completely blew me out of the water.
I don't even remember, like, I think it was just because I like had finally gotten a physical copy, so I just made a video being like, I finally got like actually physically awesome, like for SNES. I don't even remember what that video ended up looking like. I'm probably gonna look back at it now and cringe a little because it's a little older.
Oh, that's okay. I'm gonna go look it up after this and probably smile a lot.
Oh no!
And please don't turn it to private before this discussion is over.
It'll stay up. It'll stay up.
But how's it going, Kevin? We've never had you on the channel before, and I feel like a lot of people that watch Nintendo Life probably also watch your videos, like my nephew.
Yeah, which is still blowing my mind a little bit. Anytime anyone brings up like that they know a kid who's a fan, I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like, it's cool, but you never expect it, right? I actually had one time where I was at a local mall and like a mom came up to me saying like, oh, my kid loves your stuff. Can you take a photo? I'm like, what? The kid was like, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8. I'm like, I don't picture that as audience. Like, it happens because you're on YouTube, you're on the internet, and I don't make like, adult-oriented stuff or anything that's like age-gated. So it'll happen. It's just always weird it's super when you're like confronted with it a little,
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like all of us, if at least I think if we had access to it, we all watched like X-Play, or like John watched like Game Trailers had a show and stuff, right? Or was it? Isn't that something you used to watch a lot, John, back in the day?
Yeah, Game Trailers were my main thing. They had tons of stuff. There was GTTV. They had like Spike. They were on Spike TV for a long time too.
Okay.
There was a bunch of stuff on there.
But it's crazy to think that all of us had those same those kind of people were the people. Like if I like bumped into Adam Sessler back when I was a kid, I would have lost my mind. I would have asked my mom to go get a picture as well, or like Mom, I can't take a picture with him, but can you take a picture of him so I don't forget? But it's weird to think that in some ways we are not. I would never compare myself to Adam Sessler in that regard, but I think we are also we're those people for other people, and that's really cool. At the end of the day.
That's so weird to think.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you see views on a video or whatever, and you're like, oh yeah, this many people, cool, but like you don't actually like fully conceptualize it as people until you're faced with it, and you're like, oh right, that many people,
right?
Like actual human beings, individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully at the end of the day, this video gets viewed a lot. so much that Square Enix, remember, reconsiders releasing this game on the Switch, and someone's gonna walk up to us at some point in life and say, "Oh my gosh, it's that guy from that Chrono Trigger video, the Nintendo Life Chrono Trigger video."
That was the moment. That was when it all changed.
To get back on topic with Chrono Trigger. So Chrono Trigger, actually, I know you guys know all this, right? You know all of this data.
I did at one point, probably.
We're going to be blown away by this. It was made by Square?
So this game was actually made by Square Soft. This was back before Square and Enix merged together. So this released in the US and Japan. It actually both released in 1995. I think just a few months apart. But the thing that I was surprised to see was that this actually released, I thought it was fairly late in the Super Nintendo's life, but it wasn't. There were still big titles like Donkey Kong Country 2 came out this month or this year.
Even Earthbound came out 2 months before Chrono Trigger did, at least here in the States. And it's crazy to see that these two massive, so well-loved, iconic RPGs came out around the same time frame. Now, I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but I actually didn't mention anything about Europe getting a Chrono Trigger release on Super Nintendo. Isn't that right, John?
We never got it on Super Nintendo. Well, I guess we kind of did on Wii Virtual Console. It was one of those titles that was like 100 Wii points more because it was an import. So most Super Nintendo games were 800 Wii points, and this one was 900.
Oh, had to get you that extra buck.
They had to just get out of us, but...
Import costs.
Yeah. But I think that the first proper release, I'm pretty sure, was the DS version of Chrono Trigger, which was in like 2008, I want to say? Like 2009?
If you don't have Wikipedia in front of you, I am so impressed, man. Not only are you great at math,
that sounds
you
right.
also just know the dates. It was 2008, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wait,
okay.
Actually, I'm so sorry. It was, you must have your regions mixed up, John, a little bit, because it was 2008 in America, and it was 2009 in Europe. Somehow, you guys still got it late, even though you should have gotten it before us at that point. You deserved it.
Well, I mean, Europe English versus American English, so, I mean, vastly different dialects. You know, I mean, everything's, I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it takes a long time. You got the PlayStation release in, I don't know when it released, I'm going to guess, 1998. Is that when you got it?
2001.
2001?
Yeah, I think it was early
For the
2000s.
PlayStation?
Yep.
Wowzers.
Yeah, it was late in the life cycle, because that was like 7, 8, and 9 were all doing great, so they were like, okay, we should just port everything to PlayStation. We'll do these Final Fantasy collections, we'll do Origins, like they just were trying to bring everything else because it'd blown up so much on that platform.
And I guess you're right, because we didn't really have, like, Final Fantasy, I mean, the PlayStation was still new, it was the first Sony system, but I guess, yeah, I forget that, like, 7 just, like, poofed on PlayStation, and all these people just didn't have access to the other games.
Yeah. I remember, Dragon Quest VII came with a little leaflet for Dragon Quest V, I think it was, for PlayStation. It might have been Dragon Quest IV.
I just saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was planned to release, but because it came so late in the localization process and the life of the PlayStation, it just didn't happen. So they're advertising this game that doesn't exist in the West.
So like you were saying, John, when Chrono Trigger released on PlayStation 1, at least here in the US in 2001, it didn't release just standalone. In Japan it did. It released as just its own disc, own box and everything. But here in the West, it came out as Final Fantasy Chronicles and was bundled with Final Fantasy IV, which happens to be one of my favorite RPGs. So to know that these two are like in the one singular package together is still just mind-blowing to me. But like you were saying, Kevin, when they brought Chrono Trigger to PS1, it then got these really cool, like, high-quality anime trailers designed by the main... I'm pretty sure they were made by the artist of who did Chrono Trigger, which we can talk about in just a sec. But they're so nice, so high quality.
Little-known artist, not a big deal.
This indie artist.
Yeah.
Did a few manga over the years.
No one knows his name still to this day.
No, you can donate to him on coffee. I think you can give him like a couple of dollars if you want to, but he's a little known man.
We'll leave a link in the comments down below. Everyone, definitely, please, starving artist here for sure. But so this game, it also released on iOS, which I checked yesterday. It's still there. You can go and get it on your phones for $10. I think the graphics are a little, like, smoothed out. It kind of looks like someone rubbed Vaseline all over the screen.
Why do they do that? So many developers say,
it looks better, John, obviously.
It's a little weird.
Man, I was playing through the Symphony of the Night on 360, and they've got, like, original graphics and then improved graphics. And the improved ones are just this horrible Vaseline filter. I don't know why anyone... Why? I want to pin them to a wall. Why?
Yeah, why, Kevin?
Well, that's even what happened with when they did the PC port for Chrono Trigger. Initially, it was just a direct port of the mobile, and people were so angry at how the interface and so much of it looked, because there was no reason to maintain that visual style. But that was something Square Enix was doing a lot at the time. I mean, I think they ported the mobile version of Final Fantasy III to PC, and it had that same kind of interface going on. And the reaction was so negative, they actually patched it later and changed it.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, it still doesn't look quite as good as like just playing one of the more original traditional releases, but it's much better than it was at launch.
That's the thing. To this day, people think that PC version is awful, but it actually isn't that bad now. They've done numerous patches. I think there's like 5 different patches in the end. And they have made it, like some call it the definitive version. I think it's still DS. I think I still call the DS version the best, but it's definitely a good version. But it's so weird that after all these years, we've only had a handful of ports of what's arguably their best game ever made. It's just Super Nintendo, DS, PlayStation, iOS, and PC. That's barely anything over that lifespan of this game.
Yeah, it is bizarre, and maybe it comes down to a bit of licensing. Maybe Chrono Trigger doesn't. Maybe with this indie artist that we talked about, maybe they own some of the rights still, and maybe Square's like, we don't want to give that guy any money today, so we're gonna leave Chrono on the shelf. Instead, we're gonna work with Chrono Cross because everybody loves that game way more, right? So yeah, like Square Enix is doing a partnership with or a promotion with this mobile game called Another Eden. I think John and I have talked about it. You probably saw that too, Kevin. Yeah. So it's created or it's written by the scenario writer of Chrono Trigger, I believe, Masato Kato, I think is what it is. But yeah, they're crossing over Chrono Cross with it, and it's like, I mean, that I love that. I'm glad that they're still doing that. But like, where is all the love for Chrono Trigger? You guys are absolutely right. Like, this game just doesn't get. Square Enix just has this gem of a game, and they just leave it on the shelf all the time. I don't get it.
Yeah, the reception's really weird because Chrono Trigger's never been like a multi-million seller success. I don't know what the actual sales numbers are, but it's definitely not like the most popular game of all time. Most people probably haven't played Chrono Trigger. They probably know it more by its critical acclaim than anything.
Yeah.
Yet it's still like redeemed as one of the best Super Nintendo games ever. And to have that kind of title while having such a small pool of players it just kind of goes to show like how much people really do love this game. It is definitely a vocal minority, but this minority loves it so much that it's put this game on like the #1 spot of so many Super Nintendo lists over all these years.
Yeah, and even just genre lists, really. I mean, if you talk to anyone who's a big JRPG fan or even RPGs in general, depending on individual taste a little bit, it still ends up ranking within the top 3 easy for most people. You know, like it takes the tops of RPG lists, not even just specific to the SNES platform. You know, like it's just one of those sort of, it's part of like the JRPG canon. Like it's one of the things you have to reference, you know, and know about.
I'm sure Zion's going to touch on this, but its pedigree is insane. Like at the time, Dragon Quest was the defining RPG of Japan. And Yuji Horii, the guy who spearheads Dragon Quest, he was a massive part of this. And I'll let Zion take this away because he's probably got all the notes, but there's a trio.
A perfect segue anyways, because that was next on the docket, so you nailed it. Do you have the notes, John? Yeah.
I got no notes.
I was waiting for that part to come up, too.
I think, so when I was researching this, I already knew that there was quite an incredible team, a dream team, if you will, which is what I often hear them referenced as online. I feel like even Square Enix have referenced the development team as the dream team themselves. I'm not sure if they're... Do either of you know if that name, like, if it was given to them by anyone, or if that's just something that
I've heard
the
it
internet
so often,
used?
but I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it comes from, to be honest.
Okay. Well, the dream team, surprisingly, which I want to learn more about how this even came to be. Like, how did they pull this off? But the Dream Team consists of the creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, the artists, kind of like the indie artists that we were talking about before, one of which is famous for working on Dragon Ball Z, and the Dragon Quest series, was Akira Toriyama and Yuji Horii. Right, because Akira Toriyama, did they both basically work on Dragon Quest together?
Yeah. So Akira Toriyama does all the monster art and the character designs, and Yuji Horii's basically in charge of the game design.
Okay.
Yeah, those two had already done like 5 games together with Dragon Quest, and at that time, Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy weren't part of the same company. it was Square and Enix, not Square Enix. So to have Akira Toriyama and Yuji Horii come together and also work with Sakaguchi, like that was an unheard of thing to happen. And I don't quite know how Enix let it happen, because I guess Yuji Horii isn't actually a Enix employee. Is he just freelance for that company?
I think I read that they were both freelance at the time, at
Okay.
least. But that's
right.
such a great point. Is that, I mean, I think so much of us, even me now too, look at Square Enix just as, like, I was around for Squaresoft, but I forget so often that they did work, you know, individually back in the day. They were competitors, if you will.
Yeah.
And here, like, you know, he just ran over to Square and said, "Yeah, let me make a game with the Final Fantasy guy. Let me do it."
Yeah.
And it's what's really crazy at all of it too is, you know, not only is it this dream team of creators, but it was also sort of the origin for other people in the industry after. I mean, you know, part of the initial dream team is that Uematsu was doing the music, but then didn't anymore. Some of his work is still in there, but it ended up being Mitsuda. Yasunori Mitsuda.
Right, yeah.
Got start with Chrono Trigger, and this was like the big starting point for him, because I mean, there's stories about how he worked himself to the bone getting the soundtrack done for this game, and it's one of the best JRPG soundtracks there is. I mean, it's super memorable, especially from that time. The talent that came together for this game, just in all departments, is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's incredible that it actually like worked out, and it ended up becoming this game that, you know, when 1995, that, you know, over 20 years later.
26.
That feels like a crime. Oh yeah, so what happened to the 25th anniversary? Square Enix? I hope at least one Square Enix reps listens to this whole thing and is just like, these guys are right.
There's probably like a mobile game crossover in it or something. There's like,
Probably.
like some like nod somewhere, and then just, all right, moving on.
To the suits of Square, I reckon they look at the numbers and say, I don't think this is really a classic. Like, you know, Final Fantasy VII sold so much more. Dragon Quest is much bigger in Japan. No one really cares about this. And the problem is there's not really been an opportunity for people to care about this. Like, on the DS, it was still kind of forming that internet niche, in a sense. I think over the years, it's become way more popular. But on PC, I feel like the audience for this game is really on Switch. It's with like, the older Nintendo fans, and it's so strange that they're not allowing that audience to get to know it, you know?
Yeah, and speaking of actually allowing people to play this game and hear about it, I kind of wanted to ask how you guys originally like first heard about Chrono Trigger, because I don't know when you exactly played it, but I would love to hear that as well. But for me, I recall, I don't remember which magazine it was exactly, but I remember reading, it was maybe like a Game Informer or Electronic Gaming Monthly or Game Now, maybe even Tips and Tricks. I don't know, some North American publication. It could have even been a UK mag, because I think I got a few of those occasionally too here and there. But I remember like seeing just like a few screenshots of the anime intros from Chrono Trigger on PS1, or just the not the intros necessarily, but the cutscenes. And I remember seeing the shot, basically like the cover shot of Chrono, you know, like running with a sword or something like that, or maybe it was like Chrono and Frog together. I can't remember exactly, but I remember seeing that image, and I was like, that's a Dragon Ball character, but I've never seen that character before ever. I don't really remember too much about what I actually read, but I just remember that image like stuck in my brain for so long, and for the longest time I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was like a Japan only game, or if it was a secret Dragon Ball Z episode that I never saw, or a character that was going to get introduced in a future episode. You know, I was so confused, but I was so consumed by, like, you know, getting to the bottom of it. And maybe I probably should have just read more of the magazine. I don't know what, or maybe I just didn't. Maybe what I was reading, I wasn't processing. I'm not exactly sure. But then I eventually went on to, you know, I don't remember if the game was always expensive back in the day. Like when we were kids, I mean, it probably was for John because it was an import. But, you know, like I don't remember ever walking into a store and seeing the game on the shelf. But I did eventually get. I think I ended up getting a PS1 when I was like 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. And I ended up getting the Final Fantasy Chronicles collection. And I played Chrono Trigger through there, and I never beat it. I made it maybe a few hours in, or maybe I made it to the part with, is her name Ayla? Is that her name? Isla?
Pronunciations in this video are going to differ a lot.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we'll see, yeah.
I always said Ayla.
I think that's how I kind of
Ayla was the way I've always said it, but I've heard Isla too.
So I think I made it to Ayla, and then I put it down. Maybe I got lost or something. I've no good excuse for putting this game down for so many years. But then I bought it on DS, and I probably made it about just as far and put it down again until finally recently. Now I picked it up and committed, and I put the 25, 30 hours in that it took to beat the game, and I loved it. But I can't believe it took me so long to finally do it with all of the fanfare and the praise that the game gets, you know. But do either of you want to start out? Do you happen to remember where you were back in 19 whatever or 2000 or whenever you first heard about it?
I do have one quick question about the price. Was this an $80 Super Nintendo game?
Oh,
when it first came out?
I wonder if we can find an advertisement.
Because it's always been a little expensive. I mean, the definition of an expensive retro game has very much shifted in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But it's always been up there. Because I want to say when I bought it back in like 2000, what year was that? 2014 or 15, it was like $90. Which now...
Oh yeah, it's like double, isn't it? Like 200 or something like that for a...
Yeah,
something like that
$90 is like a steal for this game now.
Yeah, well, that was loose. It wasn't complete, but yeah, $80 was launch price.
Okay, nice.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, it was, and it never got like a player's choice edition either. Like I remember walking into Walmart still back in the day and finding, like I was old enough to remember buying Super Nintendo games at the store. And I think I bought Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3 just like both on whims at Walmart. And those were probably both, like, even though Donkey Kong Country 2 came out the same year that Chrono Trigger did, I probably only was exposed to that because it had a player's choice copy, now that I think about it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, maybe this game just didn't last, like, even though it had such critical reception, maybe it just didn't last long on the shelf either because of being expensive, or maybe it had a lower print run.
Yeah, how many prints they made.
Right.
There's a lot. I mean, there's probably a full essay we could do on this with actual full research into like how many copies went out and what, you know, sales figures were for the time. But just off the top of my head, yeah, I imagine the kind of distribution it got for that time was not as high as it would be like today, just in terms of, you know, again, age of the internet, communicating like what games are actually kind of a big deal. I mean, remember, this is the time when we were getting Final Fantasy games and we got different numbers, and some of them were made easier with cut content for the sake of, you know, dumb Americans. So, you know, there was a lot of differences with how these games were coming out back then.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do you want to take your origin story first, Kevin? Because mine's so boring. We didn't get this game on Super Nintendo we didn't get it at all on Super Nintendo.
That's
so
right. You were like an adult, John. I forget.
Well, and so my origin story is actually not even tied to the Super Nintendo one. Because I didn't really get into, even though it's like my favorite genre, and again, Chrono Trigger is like my favorite game of all time, I didn't actually get into RPGs until later in life. I messed around with it a little bit on SNES with Super Mario RPG, but that was more, I think, because of like the Mario in the name. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't until the PS1 era, when I didn't have a PS1, but my friends did, that I started getting exposed to stuff like Final Fantasy and all that kind of stuff. So I remember when I got a PS2, while I love the PS2 library, my initial use of the PS2 was catching up on every single PS1 game I missed. And so in the process of that, still not encountering Chrono Trigger yet, I played Chrono Cross and really enjoyed the beginning of it because I also didn't have the kind of shading of like, oh, this is a sequel to Chrono Trigger. Like, I just went in as its own thing. Didn't beat it on that first run. This was like a Blockbuster rental kind of situation. But from that, I started really looking more into Square's history. I started finding ways to play a lot of these older games, and that's when I finally put time to play Chrono Trigger. I don't remember what age I was at the time. I might have been 14 maybe-ish, like early teens. And I mean, I don't know how many times I replayed it, like that first experience. Like, I just fell in love with it so hard that it immediately cemented itself as one of my favorites, and to this day that love has never dwindled. Like, it just made that much of an impact playing it later.
Mm-hmm. I was kind of the same with the PS2 being my like portal to PlayStation 1, because my friend had a PlayStation when I was younger, but I had a Dreamcast, so I had a very different kind of library to what they had. So when I got my PS2, I went straight to playing Final Fantasy VII and Crash and Spyro and like all the key PS1 Pillar Stone games. But it was mainly the RPGs I was catching up on, and so I'd play through Final Fantasy VII, 8, 9, Dragon Quest I'd import, but I was kind of just like getting my RPG kick, because as a kid, it was just Pokemon for me. I didn't really play anything else, it's just Pokemon Red and Pokemon Silver. So I wanted to get further into that genre. And then when Chrono Trigger came to DS, this is a very boring story. So when Chrono Trigger came to DS, I was like, yeah, another RPG. And I'd already seen it on so many like top Super Nintendo lists. So I thought like, hey, this is the time. So yeah, there wasn't any build up to this. It was just kind of like, oh, guess I gotta play this one now. But then I ended up loving it though. My expectations were so small. I barely heard of this game. All I knew that it was highly regarded. So I had no spoilers. I didn't know who any characters were. And just going in blind is my favorite way to play games like this. Like just experiencing everything yourself.
I wonder if big publishers, like Square Enix, happen to look at a release like, releasing Chrono Trigger on DS, and they put a lot of effort into it. I think, adding extra content and just like, making it kind of like what you guys said, making it the best version of Chrono Trigger out there. I wonder if they look at this though and they're like, nobody plays that, or like, only people that grew up with it are gonna play it. But like for you, John, like that was your moment to finally play Chrono Trigger, and without it, I mean, you still to this day, it might still just be on your backlog. Maybe someone would have convinced you, or you would have finally had the time to play it on Virtual Console, or import a Super Nintendo copy, or play it on Steam or something. But the DS version was your gateway into finally getting the chance to play that game.
I think all companies should make their games more readily available, because even people who didn't grow up with those games are going to have a chance to play them. I played so much with the Virtual Console. When someone says to me, oh, I missed out on that game, I think they're making excuses. I think that you can always go back and play a game. They're not disposable. They're going to be there forever. But companies also need to make a good job of making them readily available, which Square have not been doing with this game. But Xeon's just finished Chrono Trigger for the very first time. And that's not an excuse, Zion. You've gone back.
That's true.
You played that game.
I did.
It's not lost to time. You can do it. Yeah, everyone can do it.
It does feel sometimes like I reflected this year and was like, wow, I played a lot of retro games, but I think I could have went and played Final Fantasy VII Remake by now, or I could have played Cyberpunk 2077, and I could have had a way less good time, But instead, I went back and like enjoyed this gem that people have been praising for years, and finally, like now I get it. I understand. Like after all these years, I understand why this game is so well loved. And so one thing I actually wanted to mention to you guys, I should have sent it over, but when I was researching just talking points for this video, I wanted to go back and kind of see like how the game was reviewed back in the day. And so I only looked up one review, but I found the exact page from Nintendo Power when they reviewed this game. And when I read the review, I was kind of like, man, they really didn't they crunched so much into just like basically like 2 paragraphs, or maybe it's just one, I guess. At one point they describe, hold on, there's a really funny line here. Here we go. The companions are an entertaining bunch that include a princess, a frog, and a robot. That's a professional.
It's not wrong.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's an apt description.
It's so direct. Like it's so bare bones. But
I feel like leaving out Cave Woman was really a disservice, though. Like that really rounds out the.
You're right. Yeah. How did she get forgotten? There's there's like a plus and a minus at the end, like a pro and a con.
Okay.
And they say excellent graphics, depth, sound, replay value, battery backed up memory with 3 slots. Oh. That's also that's something to be excited about.
That's a big deal, man. Back in
You're
the day.
right. That's true. 3. And then they also the negative is that you'll be spoiled for every other RPG. And and I think it's cool.
That's held up. That's a good review point.
It's cool to see it's still like the same as it was back then. Because this game was really like groundbreaking for its time. I feel like Final Fantasy 2 or 4, whatever you want to call it, was my first real RPG beyond. Actually, I think I played it even before Pokemon, because we had a hand-me-down Super Nintendo, and that was one of them. But I remember. I've heard like Jared Petty, for example, if anyone is familiar with him. He's spoken about Final Fantasy 2 and 4 quite a bit passionately in podcasts and things. And he always talks about how that was like one of the first games to kind of have such an in-depth story with moments that almost feel like you're watching a movie or something like that, and we didn't have that as much on NES or even just the early days of Super Nintendo. And Chrono Trigger really takes that kind of that idea of like they wanted to make this an entertaining like thrill ride of an experience, and they They took the ceiling and they crushed it. They X-striked right through the ceiling. It's gone.
Like, both Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy at the time were both very, like, classic fantasy and medieval kind of settings. Final Fantasy deviates quite a bit sometimes, but for the most part, that was the formula. And Chrono Trigger, I mean, I don't know how you explain... I mean, it's not one time period, for one. It goes all over. It's a time travel-based story. It goes where it wants to go. But it also disrupted the battle system.
Oh, yeah.
Which is something... A lot of modern RPGs do that today. Like, they'll come up with these brand new battle systems, and sometimes it's tiring. Like, sometimes I wish that Final Fantasy would just go back to being kind of simple. But Chrono Trigger managed to find a brilliant balance between the two styles. Because it still is classic, it still is turn-based, but it's just this ingenious take on it, though. And there's so many different avenues you can put together. Different party members can all have these different abilities together. And it just feels like this continuous strive for innovation and experimentation. And it's easily one of my favorite battle systems ever.
It is insane how fluid it was for the time.
I mean, honestly, that's exactly one of the thoughts that I had going into this talk too, is the way it approached the flow of the gameplay, right? Because random battles were such a standard at the time for RPGs. And look, having grown up with the genre, it's something that I have learned it's just a thing that you're used to. But sometimes when you revisit it after other ways, you can feel the frustration a lot more. And so when this was new at its time, this is one of the first games not doing that. It's not taking you out of exploration and putting you in this separate screen, and then you see a results screen. It's like, no, all this happens in the same map. You're exploring, you immediately get into combat position right where you're standing. It also made fights feel a lot more interesting in a lot of situations, because now the environment, even though it didn't actually fully play a functional part of the gameplay, it still felt like, because you're seeing different formations, different stances, and sometimes enemy, how they line up and stuff would make some moves a little better than usual. The way it was able to kind of keep that continuous flow, and that you knew how to then anticipate where enemies were going to be, or where an ambush might happen, or try to, kind of dodge and weave through enemies because you don't want to do a fight right now. That was so different for its time in that genre, and it really did help with that sense of pacing and flow, because it never felt like it was interrupted. Like, sometimes maybe, but it felt like a surprise, really, and not just like oh great, the screen shaked and I'm here again in the same endless hallway with 4 random enemies.
Like, when you think about like Sakaguchi and Yuri, when you think about Sakaguchi and Yuri Horii coming together, you'd imagine like a crossover between Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, but instead it does the exact opposite of that. It kind of breaks what those games were trying to be in the first place. Like, no random encounters, no like traditional turn-based battles, no just kind of medieval storyline. I guess they kind of took their own weaknesses and just did the exact opposite, and somehow made what is essentially a masterpiece.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think Final Fantasy IV was the first game to introduce like an active time battle system as well.
Yep.
But you had the option to, I think, either slow that down heavily, or maybe you could turn it off entirely when you were interacting with party members. And I didn't realize until I was going back to get some footage of Chrono Trigger for this video, was that Chrono Trigger also has that same option where you can choose to not attack or not have time move while you're picking your options and things like that. But I honestly think like it's much harder to play that way. But I think it makes it so much more of an exciting experience by having the active time battle system on. And you're also just kind of if you turn that off, you're just kind of missing part of the point of and the fun of the game. But it made some of like the final bosses and even just random parts of the game, I felt so invested, and like it was stressful in the best way possible, because I was worried about the risk of like actually losing my character and my party, and because everything was moving so, it wasn't fast enough that I couldn't like keep up with it, but it felt like I was constantly on my toes. And for like an RPG where you do get to stop and like breathe and take your time, this was kind of it must have been a different thing for its time still, even with something like Final Fantasy back, doing something similar. But
I guess another big part of the combat system too is the party members. In so many RPGs, I'll stick with the same party formation like right until the end. Maybe there's like one battle where a certain party member comes in handy, but for the most part, I'm not changing. Like with Persona, with Final Fantasy, with Dragon Quest, it's always the same from beginning to end. But with Chrono Trigger, I felt the will to mix things up. Mostly because there's so many combinations, there's so much that certain party members are better at than others. And I think it's like one of the only RPGs where I just felt the will to just keep switching my formation up. Were you guys kind of the same?
I definitely experimented, and I think part of what really drives at least wanting to experiment with party members is the fact that, like, you know, dual techs and stuff don't open up immediately. You actually have to have them fight together to see those moves learned. I mean, it takes like one battle after they know the requisite moves, but still. So having that kind of knowing that there's these moves that are exclusive to having pairings of characters, like it's not just the individual movesets, but it's the fact that the movesets they have as units together really encourages you to want to at least mess around a little bit. I do think I did eventually settle in, I think, with like a final party, but it wasn't like I got these 3 characters and now that's it forever. I definitely did experiment a little bit just for the sake of being like, oh, well, this guy learned a new move. I wonder if now with this character there might be a new dual tech, you know, or then when triple techs open up in late game, you know, what are these 3 characters going to do together? What are these 3 characters going to do together? You know, just wanting to kind of sample, especially with how moves looked in that game too, right? I mean, we're talking about things that were different for its time. I mean, the visual style as well, right? A lot of the other RPGs were either the Dragon Quest style, front view, dungeon crawler kind of look, or it was the Final Fantasy sideways. This is this, like, not exactly top-down. I mean, I guess it was maybe isometric for its time. I don't know what term you would use for this kind of bird-eye approach.
Just like Zelda kind of looking, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. But you still have the sideways view of characters in some ways, you know? It's kind of off-angle a little bit. But seeing the animations for a lot of those moves, and then actually seeing these moves pulled off, right? It's like, oh, whoa, like this character jumped in the air, another character shot fire at them, and it covered their sword, and they slashed down. That was insanely cool looking for its time. You know, I mean, it still looks cool. Like, it's aged incredibly well.
Yeah.
You know, like that really did encourage you to mess around more because you just wanted to see all the stuff you could do.
Yeah, and unlike so many other RPGs, we just kind of mash the A button to attack. Like, just get through this battle, just keep mashing. Like, active time stops you from doing that for one. But also, I guess you think a bit more about, like, your positioning, about what moves you're going to use, about where your partner's ATB gauges as well. Like, there are very few fights where I just mashed A to get through, and that keeps it way more engaging than many other RPGs.
Yeah, well, and it gives you a reason to wait, right? Because it's like, oh, I want to use this dual tech, so, you know, Chrono's up and ready, but I want to use Aura Whirl, so I gotta wait for Marley, you know, like, come up, so I can do party heal. I need that party heal.
And I didn't realize, actually, that... So, like, for me, I stuck with... You know, other than the times that the game like asks you to go put someone else in your party, or requires it rather, I pretty much stuck with like Frog, Meryl the whole time. That was my go-to. But honestly, now that I like am chatting with you guys about it, I realized I'm messed up because there were so many like are they called triple techs? Is that what you said they're called? Where you?
Yep.
Okay, so I did unlock like one of those, I think, and I used that a few times for sure. But I didn't realize that, like, the more that you fight with other party members, that you'll unlock more. Part of the reason why I ended up sticking with them towards the end of the game was I was like, oh, well, I have, like, these cool moves with these characters. I don't want to, like, go pull somebody else in that isn't going to, like, synergize with them as well. But I didn't realize that they were just going to... Eventually, they will work better together if I just took them out of the toy box.
I mean, that's the cool thing, man. Like, Chrono Trigger's not a long game. It's like a 20-hour RPG, maybe like 25-hour. But it's not long by RPG standards. But there's so much depth to like the combat, to what you can unlock, and to the endings particularly. And like you see your decisions come into play so early on. Like there's a point at the beginning with the carnival where you just kind of like you do very small things. Like if you like run away from Marley, you can impact the courtroom later. It's just these tiny little details you do which do impact the story in quite major ways. And it makes this really, like, quite brief game so replayable.
That was such a good oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I remembered on my recent playthrough, you know, since I've started the game like 3 times over the years, and the third time's the charm, I guess. I knew about the fact that you're not supposed to eat the guy's lunch, but I did it on accident anyways in my most recent playthrough, and I was like, crap, that's gonna come back and bite me later, and it bit me harder than I thought it was going to, but I do. That's like one of those things that I want to ask about, but I also want to just kind of leave it alone. Like I want to know what happens if you do everything right. Like you probably still get thrown in jail anyways. But that's the cool thing with this game. Like you're saying, is that there's so many interesting aspects that, like, you know, if you do this or that, or you know all the different endings, which I only tackled one because I didn't realize that all of the endings came from just going and fighting Lavos.
or a majority of them, rather, I should say, at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I love that there's, even after you're done with the game, like you can have 20, 30 hours in it, and you can still go back to it, which I'm looking forward to doing someday, and still having so many little surprises and maybe just different dialogue options, with the characters, and there's just still so much to uncover after you're done, and that felt like such a new thing probably back then as well.
I mean, can we talk spoilers at this point, or are we going to leave that until later?
I don't know if there's a way that I can cut this discussion down a lot, because I feel like there's a lot of good stuff. So if anyone's watching this and they're into the 40-minute mark or whatever, I don't even know where we're at right now. I think this is a fine spoiler territory point.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a bit about the endings. I mean, there's so much of the actual game world we haven't talked about yet, but this is just a good point to bring it up. But,
so if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, go download it right now on Steam, on iOS. Just play it somewhere. Go buy a DS copy.
Somewhere.
This is your warning.
So, Chrono dies. And
what a spoiler! Wait, Chrono dies?
Yeah, just hard open. Like, what are we going with
there's
first?
there's an ending. There's multiple endings, and you can end the game without ever reviving him. That's a fascinating way to end it. So if you want to, you can never revive the main character.
Yeah, and really, that's like the earliest achievable ending you can do on your first playthrough. I would say, like, naturally. Like, I know people where that was their first ending because they just didn't. They were like, well, I don't know what to do now, so I'm just going to take this party and go fight Lavos. Because you're about high enough level by that point to where it's not going to be an easy fight, but like you can get through it at that point, kind of naturally. And that's what's really cool too, is that can just occur.
That's like an Aerith thing here, except for you can bring him back. Like it's not a rumor. This is real deal,
No, it's a ridiculous situation. Other spoilery territory stuff, just because we were talking about, dual text, triple text, and all that type of thing. I also love how that combat mechanic was used in a way to also kind of personify characters a little bit. Seeing what moves they have in common, or the fact that, the seventh party member, the secret, this is where I think pronunciations are going to vary depending on who we're talking to. I say Magus.
Same.
I say Magus too.
Okay, yeah. Magus doesn't have any dual text. He just doesn't play with other party members. He has he's like, 2 triple techs with very specific parties, and that's it.
Yeah, he's a loner.
Does not play. And I don't think, and none of them are with Chrono either, so you can't have him in Chrono and have a triple tech. Like,
yeah.
Or he might have one. Actually, now that I think about it, I forget. He has a couple, but it's there's one that's like a fire one with Robo and Luca, and then, is it Marley and Luca for the other one? I can't remember. But yeah, like that's a cool concept. I mean, maybe it was just because they had an optional character and they didn't want to fully flesh him out as much, but I think it was a cool personality choice.
Yeah. We kind of grazed over, most of the game, and we went straight to the ending there.
You're right.
But like, this is a game about time travel, and it's cool to see what impact on the world, like while you play. One of the early story beats is the princess gets taken back in time, and you go and save her. And it turns out that you find her ancestor in there. And then the stakes are high because if she dies, then she never exists. So it's just that kind of stuff that it sort of impacts the rest of the game. But you can do small things that will impact the future and the past and the present. And it's so cool to see what you do kind of resonate throughout the rest of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of video games that people... it's fun to go back to because you feel nostalgic for it or something like that. But you don't always find something new in all of those playthroughs, right? Like I can play. I think all of us can probably have a game that we can play every year. Like I would love to go back and play Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time if I didn't have a ginormous backlog of games that that I'm ignoring every day. But whenever I go back to play those games, it feels kind of like it's cozy, like you say, John. It's like a blanket, But with Chrono Trigger, you have so many. I mean, I guess I've already touched on this, in this chat, but it's cool to know that there are so many little, like, if you want to go back and try something different, like, you're probably going to be rewarded for it, even if it is just like a new small line of dialogue or something like that. Like, I think there's the moment with Meryl where her dad gets really, really mad at her, or maybe I think that's in the modern age. And the Chancellor says something about like the fact that he wants jerky, and I was like, shoot, where am I gonna get that? And I think that was one of the parts that I used the strategy guide for online, because my guide wasn't helping me, or maybe I didn't have it with me at the time. I don't know. But I ended up looking it up, and apparently it's like a completely optional thing, because you end up giving jerky to Dad, and then he has heartburn or something, or it's like super spicy, and like you should have known better, and then he gets super mad at you and he locks the door to his room and he doesn't let you in.
And eventually you repair that relationship with him, but it's like a completely optional little thing that I'm pretty sure it has no actual bearing over the game, really, beyond just this weird little thing. But in the moment, I was like...
It's such a little thing.
I was like, oh God, what did I do? Like, do I need to, like, load up my old save? Like, was this an accident? You know? And, but it's... Yeah. I mean, I guess RPGs are... RPGs do little things like that when they can, you know, just like extra little things to make you laugh that don't always pertain to the real story. But it's cool, even though this game has it already has so many options. Like, it has time travel, the characters are so well fleshed out. They still threw in like all these little things that make it feel like an anime that you can always come back to. And there's always like a filler episode that you can look forward to, like, watching with the characters that you went on this like big epic journey with, you know, like they're always there to give you something new.
Yeah, it's good filler.
Or side stories that just cut to your core, like Robo, you know, building that forest and then just sitting down with him. I mean, that scene is legendary. It's referenced in so much fan art and is like a classic scene. And it's completely optional. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the major side quest near the end, so you're encouraged a little more. It's not quite a hidden scene, but it is missable if you just go right to the ending, you know?
When I got to that point too, by the way, where you have the option to like let him go and work on you know, repairing the forest, I was like, am I just giving him up for the rest of the game now? What's happening here? Is he gone?
Sure. Time travel.
Yeah, yep, you got it. And he's still alive and kicking, of course. Well, actually, I guess he was asleep, but
just needs a little grease.
Yeah, just a little grease, a little oil. He'll be fine.
Got tired.
Yeah.
This is one thing that Nintendo Power Extract just completely missed out on. Like, you're saying that there is a frog called Frog. There is a the robot called Robo. I mean, what's interesting about them though is that, like, each party member comes from a different point in time. Like, you're amassing this collection of friends from all over the time period. And it's just so funny that they wouldn't mention that, you know? That's not the coolest thing about it.
I mean, they obviously loved it because I found out they did a huge spread on Chrono Trigger in that issue. Because I think, the Chrono Trigger review, like, it should have just gotten a full page, but they shared it with Earthworm Jim and Centipede/Millipede on the Game Boy.
Oh my.
So, like, yeah, and thankfully Chrono Trigger does have a larger review than both of those games.
Limited space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get Magus in your party, Zion?
I did. Oh, it's an option?
He's optional.
Really?
He's optional.
You can turn him down, and that's it.
Wow. I had no idea. And he's just like, see you later?
I forget, is there a prerequisite as well? Because you have the option to turn him down when he offers. Was there something else you had to do beforehand as well? I can't remember.
It's been too long for me to remember.
It's choosing not to fight him is like the big thing.
All I remember is like the big fight. I remember the first fight against him mostly. That's what stuck in my brain. I don't even remember the part where he joins my party, which is great for my second playthrough, because then it'll be brand new.
Yeah, no, you can choose to fight him, and things go very differently. So for at least, you know, that little plot thread. So, and
speaking of characters too, it's some of these characters have really tragic backstories.
Most of them,
like Magus. I always thought he was gonna be like, I don't know, just this like edgy vampire guy with a scythe. You know, like looking at media. That's I never pictured him being. Obviously, he had to be integral to the story. Like, look at him. But I thought he was just gonna be like this Vincent character from Final Fantasy VII, just like optional apparently. But I didn't think he was going to be, he's the son, right? Who did he time travel
Little
himself?
Brother.
Oh yeah. But the son of the son of the queen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, his whole thing is that he gets stranded in the Middle Ages because he's from like the Kingdom of Zeal era. And then a large part of his whole plot line is trying to get back, basically. Like, he's trying to fix and get revenge for... So it's one of those things where it's like, it's still like kind of negatively, you know, focused reasoning, but he is kind of trying to do a good thing. It's just does a lot of evil stuff in the process.
Yeah, I do remember. So, like, you know, for all these years, I've known that Lavos was the big bad enemy, and like Magus is trying to bring it back and stuff. But the moment that Magus, I don't remember the exact line, but he alluded to the fact that he was trying to defeat Lavos, and like we got in the way of that. I like put down the DS and was like, what am I playing right now? My brain was like completely wired that Magus was, you know, out to destroy the world, just because of The way, I mean, the story leads you to think that, right? But it was so surprising.
And really, on that note, with Lavos and the storyline of the game, one thing that I didn't even think about this back when I played it, but a friend of mine who's also a huge fan brought this up to me one time as something that stood out to him. Is something that's really interesting about the Chrono Trigger storyline compared to a lot of other RPGs, especially of its time, is how the character motivations for what you're doing are ultimately just sort of kids wanting to do a good thing. You know, Lavos isn't a current threat for the characters. It's way far off in the future. I mean, there's some opening motivation for why you go back in time and how the whole kind of time travel shenanigans begin. But ultimately what brings you into this larger plot is characters who see a problem that is not really going to be their own personal issue and still go, let's try to save the world. Like, it's this very, like, it's purely character motivation driven, as opposed to being like, oh, the Dark Overlord at this castle killed your family, and you're the last of the line of whatever. Like, it's some kids who accidentally figured out time travel and decide to use it for good. You know, like, it's such a interestingly different motivation storyline-wise for the characters, and really gives them, ultimately, you know, some of the most heroic personalities out of main protagonists, because it's not really personally driven at all.
No, there's so much heart in this game, which is hard to accomplish because there's some really high-stakes moments during the story. But they managed to achieve all this heart without it feeling like filler. Like, we were talking about filler moments earlier, but I feel like everything is kind of justified. Like, every moment of playtime is justified. And like, so many RPGs are like, oh, here's the hot spring segment. Don't peek, boys. There's nothing like that in here.
So many.
It's just moment-to-moment importance. But it takes the time to not forget that it's still a lighthearted story at the end of the day, while still like achieving all these high-stakes moments. It's crazy how they achieve that in such a short runtime.
Yeah. Well, and even the side quests too, right?
Yeah.
Just in this, how, you know, side quests are loaded all at the end. They're all optional, but none of them feel like, go here and kill some things. Like, all of them add like a little bit of resolution to some characters' storylines, gives them little bits of closure to some of their own personal backstories and traumas. Like, it all adds to the overarching structure. Like you said, none of it ever feels like filler in the sense of being just like, okay, we spent our time doing this. Like, it all feels very intentional and still plays a role in that overall structure, which, again, is part of what makes it so memorable.
Yeah, I think when I got to that point as well, you're like, you can tell you're almost at the end of the game, but now you have this just wealth of side quests at you. And I think in most games, I usually look at that. Well, actually, even when I got to this point in Chrono Trigger, I looked at those side quests and I was like, oh man, like I'm so close. I could go to the end of the game. Like I'm right there. But then as I started doing the side quests, you're absolutely right. Like, they feel integral to the main game, but you get the option of like if you want to do them or not, or the order that you choose as well. Yeah. And you're constantly being rewarded as well with, you know, more like closure on certain characters, or like a really I don't want to say I don't remember if any of them had cutscenes on the DS PS1 version, but the way that the game is animated. And how emotive the characters are as well, is that the game often feels like you're watching or like reading a comic book or watching a movie, just because of the fact that these characters are kind of like, you know, like you said earlier, Kevin, you're battling in the same exact areas that you're interacting with characters in as well, exploring. Yeah, so it helps the whole package just come together, and it's just so impressive. I want to go play it again, but I also really want to just like leave. I want future Zion to have some Chrono Trigger tidbits to go back to.
Leave some time.
Yeah, give it a little breathing room.
Yeah, it's one of those games. I'd recommend multiple playthroughs, but not all in one span. Play it next year.
Yeah. How did you guys handle that? Do you remember what your first endings were or anything like that?
I think my first one was just like the vanilla, like the true ending, and I was using a guide to kind of try and nudge my way there. But I've also experimented a little bit. I've had endings where Chrono doesn't survive. I've had endings without Magus being in the party. It's just I haven't seen every single ending, but I've definitely seen a bunch of them.
What's funny too is there's definitely joke ones too, where it's like they're intentionally jokey because it's like, all right, there's no way you could really do this in your first playthrough. So in like a second or third, you'll find these like for doing the game earlier. Some of which don't make any sense. They're like, oh, because you didn't do this, the world's like this now. Doesn't actually make sense in some cases, but it's a fun ride for some of them. Like they definitely kind of do a little tongue in cheek with some of the endings you can unlock, which is fun.
And there is an ending with the Dream Team in there. So like you've got Akira Toriyama, Yuji Horii, and
the Dev Room.
and Sakaguchi in the game. Yeah.
Yep. It's the hardest one to unlock, but it's like you can do it. All you have to do basically is like max Chrono, which you'll do with a couple playthroughs. But yeah, there's the hardest ending to get is the dev room, and that was a tradition they brought over to Chrono Cross as well.
That's so cool.
That was something you could do there too.
I wonder, do you think Square is afraid to remake Chrono Trigger now? Because I feel like the only time Chrono Trigger has come back and people get upset about it is because the PlayStation 1 version has slow load times, or the fact that the sprites are muddy and they went across it with a bunch of oil and now it looks like trash, which they eventually fixed, like we said, thankfully. But this game has like an untarnished reputation for the most part. I wonder, because I remember, I'm pretty sure this wasn't in a magazine as well. I had to have read it online or saw the trailer. But I know there were fan projects that started up over the years too. Like, wasn't there like a full-on 3D Chrono Trigger remake that somebody was making and got cease and desisted, I assumed, by Square?
Yeah, no, there's multiple projects. There was a fan remake that was 3D that got cease and desisted. There was a fan sequel that also served as like a midquel to Chrono Cross, which I think they called Chrono Break or something. And you can actually find that. I think that one got completed enough that they ended up like creating fake carts.
Sure.
They were repro style carts, but they dumped their own ROM onto it in order to make it this playable experience on an SNES. There have been a lot of fan projects for Chrono Trigger, and most of them have been either cease and desisted or they were just very quiet projects that released their thing into the wild, and you just happen to go to the right websites or know the right people that you learn about them.
Mm-hmm. That's sweet.
Yeah. If they ever just full-on remake Chrono Trigger, though, I mean, it has to be done right. And they could just do like a Trials of Mana style, like kind of budget remake. And that would be fine. But it wouldn't really do it wouldn't really fit the reputation of Chrono Trigger. I feel like this game, even though it's never been a blockbuster, even though it's never like set the charts on fire, I think if you remake it properly, its reputation will carry it. I think it would definitely succeed. But I don't know. I have no idea how Square value this game is the thing, though. I don't know if they see it as this, monolith.
Yeah, well, and the way I view it is, it's one of the situations where, I think some people have atrophy, or that's probably not the right word, but some people are very fatigued when it comes to remakes, especially when it's like, you don't need to remake everything. When some people brought up like, oh, well, they should remake Chrono Trigger instead of, because there's the rumors of them porting or remastering, or we don't really know what form it'll take, but Chrono Cross is apparently coming back in some form. And so, some people voiced, well, they should just do Chrono Trigger instead. I feel like the DS port/update did about as much additional content as you could do while still preserving the core thing that I'm happy with. And I'd be fine with just making that accessible in a playable way on modern systems without some of the changes made for like iOS versions in terms of interface and that kind of stuff. Like that, to me, I feel like that game doesn't really need a remake. I think Chrono Cross could benefit from a remake with the right adjustments and changes. But I think Chrono Trigger is really one of those ones where just do a solid port, just give me a way to play it. And that's what's so weird about the situation right now. I mean, we're talking about, Square Enix, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you porting this game? They've actually been on fire lately when it comes to porting a lot of their older stuff. I mean, who saw Saga ports coming the last 2 years? Trials of Mana getting a translation as part of a collection and getting a, remake, cool. As you said. I mean, who saw that coming, 5 years ago? The number of games they're bringing back out of nowhere. I mean, Legend of Mana is now on my Switch. I never thought I'd see that day, And so what makes it especially weird right now is, you think back to Chrono Trigger being this game that, again, has such high critical praise and has this dedicated fan base. And it's like, so, you did all these ones. What's going on right now? What are we seeing with this one?
Right. Like, I feel like there's definitely the argument that maybe Square is like releasing other things and holding out on releasing Chrono Trigger because they don't want to, they want to give these other games a chance before they throw all their cards on the table. But at the same time, if Chrono Trigger is out, people will play it and they will move on to potentially other RPGs, and they'll still, maybe someone will play Chrono Trigger and then they'll want to go back and experience other Square games beyond that. But it just feels like it's like the Metroid Prime trilogy thing all over again. Like, you're just leaving like good money on the table and just give the people what they want, right? Like, I don't understand. I kind of
Nintendo.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say Nintendo shouting out all the other mainline Metroid games while releasing Dread. It's like, cool. Can I play any of these? Yeah. Like, I could play like 2 of them maybe on like the online system, but like, what about What about the advanced games? Can I play those somewhere? Or Nintendo, let me give you money.
Available now to download on your Nintendo Wii U, everyone.
Awesome. Beautiful.
I appreciate the fact that you appreciate Chrono Trigger for what it is as well, and like don't feel like you need to see a remake, even though you played it so much longer ago than I. Because I feel like I often fall into a loop where like I'm always begging for a Golden Sun remake, or I would love to see original, like just base Earthbound. I would love to see that remade in like a new Clay format. But I think I look at Earthbound with a different lens, where like that game has some faults that I would love to see cleaned up, and why not spruce it up with a new look as well. But it's cool to hear that, yeah, after all these years, like you're still happy with just Chrono Trigger as it was made, or with the DS improvements. But
yeah, well, I mean, even without the DS improvements, honestly, I mean, even the original SNES version, because the PlayStation version in some ways is worse, even though you got the cool anime cutscenes. You also have the weird like loading stagger whenever you go into fights, which you don't have on SNES.
Oh, it's that bad? Wow.
Yeah, no, it's a noticeable, like everyone freezes for like, I mean, it's not forever, but yeah, like everyone will stop moving and the music doesn't start yet, and so there's this like second and a half of like, am I about to fight something? And then it happens, But no, it's one of those things, right, where, like you said, there are those games where there are things where you could see where a remake would make sense, where you're like, look, I do love this thing, but I see the flaws in it, and I see how, it can be improved. And I think Chrono Cross is an excellent example of this, which is why, to me, it makes more sense that they might be doing something with that. And I stand by the idea that I think Chrono Trigger has aged incredibly well. I think to this day, in terms of that flow of gameplay, the storytelling involved, I mean, there are games that come out today, indie titles, that are just trying to create that same kind of 16-bit style anyways.
Yeah.
If Chrono Trigger came out today as a small little indie title, but as it is, it would still get the same kind of reaction and praise. I think it would get that same kind of praise that it did back then in the 90s. And so, yeah, when I think of it coming back in a modern age, personally, I just want a port. And maybe that's, like you were saying in terms of access to the rest of games or being encouraged to play stuff, maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're making a Chrono Cross remaster, remake, something with more changes, and then Chrono Trigger is going to come out sometime around then to be like, hey, the story before it, or here's how to lead them in. Because that's you said you haven't done the bonus content in the DS one yet,
correct,
right?
Yep.
So a large part of the bonus content in the DS version, the end game stuff at least, is almost like a strange apology for Chrono Cross. Not in that I think it needs one, but if you play Chrono Cross all the way through, and you have played Chrono Trigger, aside from whatever qualms you might have about gameplay changes or whatever, how they handle past characters, there's a lot of things that don't fully make sense in terms of the world. You're like, oh, how did this happen with this nation? Like, why are these guys this way? And so the DS one has a lot of these very strange, very quickly rushed endgame bits that are like, oh, by the way, here's how, like, this nation becomes militarized. Just quick line from this character. Here's where this thing comes up. It even reconfirms a thing that they initially were going to have be a plot point in Chrono Cross that they removed, and then they re-added it and made it canon in Chrono Trigger DS.
Wow.
Which is hilarious and silly to me.
Yeah.
So should I play Chrono Cross first and then go back and play the bonus content for Chrono Trigger? Like, do you think that's if I had the choice?
I think you play Cross first, to be honest. Yeah. Play it in like the release order, and then I think you can kind of understand where Kevin's coming from here. Like the DS content's good. I don't think it's of the caliber of the base game, though.
No, it's very much sort of like, here's how we gel. Here's how we make these two gel together a little more, because people didn't like how one led to the other.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
There's one particular story beat that's like the final note of the Chrono Trigger like endgame stuff that is definitely like a and it's totally a plot point they removed from Chrono Cross. They said like, oh yeah, in planning we thought maybe we would do this in the story, but then we decided to drop it last second, and then they just made it canon again in DS, which is so strange.
Yeah. I am interested in one thing, Zion. So people talk about classic games on this high pedestal, and sometimes it's hard to criticize them because there's just this fan base who are so passionate about them who aren't open to hearing criticism. Do you feel this is one of the best games of all time?
So my worry here, I'm probably just going to leave this big like open pause in the video, but my worry here was that I thought you were about to ask me if I had any criticism about Chrono Trigger. Like I was trying...
I mean, we can get into that if you want
but
to.
I don't think I do.
Okay.
That was... like I was trying to prep myself, and maybe if you gave me a day, I could find something. But like... kind of like, what Kevin was saying about like about a remake coming out, and kind of, what I was bouncing off with the Earthbound stuff and all of that. I can't really find anything that I would go back and fix about Chrono Trigger beyond maybe fleshing out the dialogue more and just like giving us a new way to experience the game. Like I think even though I just finished Chrono Trigger, you know, I would love to see the game kind of remade in if they stick to the script, you know, or maybe add in a few just like make dialogue a bit longer or something. But I would love to see like a fully animated version, like the Trials of Mana art style, but taken to the next level. I would love to be around if that ever happens someday. But I think with the way that the story carries itself, the excitement of being able to finish the game and still like and not be tired of it, of being excited to go back, because that's one thing I think is usually by the time I'm done with a game, I'm like I'm not interested in doing the side quests because there's too many other games to be playing. But I did go do all the side quests for Chrono Trigger, even though at the time I didn't know that they were so vital to, you know, getting Chrono back or even just seeing deeper stories. I didn't know like the prize that was at the end of those side quests. I didn't know it was so grand. Like being able to sit down at the campfire site and see all of the characters, you know, just having you know, chatting about their journey and you saw them in kind of like they were just exposed, just relaxed, just hanging out together, and that felt so unnatural for the rest of the game. But you were rewarded with that by doing the side quest, and I don't know, I really did love the game, and
That's awesome.
I've said it before, like on Twitter and things like that. But I'm bummed that it took me so long to play this game, but I'm so glad that I did, and it really does feel like Final Fantasy IV is my favorite RPG purely for nostalgia. But there are so many things like character development wise and the battle system and the art, everything about Chrono Trigger, like it feels like the team went forward in time and came back with a game that worked on current gen hardware. You know, like they were able to do things that nobody else was trying on the system at the time.
Yeah. Which actually, on that note, what's really interesting too is because it's an excellent example of a game that made use of the hardware limitations of its time. Part of the benefit of the time travel storyline is that they could fit technically multiple worlds because it was just reusing a lot of the same assets but moving a couple things around. I mean, you know, much of the, whatever it is, like the Middle Ages and the present day are very similar, and that allowed them to fit more plot and concepts without having to take as much space up on the cart, you know, because there's only so much room they could work with. And that's really one of the things that was impressive about it for its time.
This was planned for the Super Nintendo CD at one point as well.
Really?
So you can kind of see those pillar stones there. I mean, this kind of feels like it would have, like this is like the lost Super Nintendo CD game in all of its scope, and you can kind of feel that. But they somehow pulled it off without the peripheral, which never existed for us. but yeah, it's a crazy game with crazy scope, and I think the point of this video is just trying to get more people interested. Because there might not be an accessible version outside of Steam right now, but if you just hook up a DS or try and find a copy on Super Nintendo if you can, there's so much great stuff to find in here. And it's always a good feeling to play a new favourite game. I had that feeling earlier this year, where I played Dragon Quest V for the first time. That's now one of my favourite RPGs ever. And I had that same sort of feeling to Zion, was like, why did I wait to play this for so long? It's so good. And I think so many people have that experience with Chrono Trigger because it really is that good. And the fact that Zion's just played it for the first time all the way through and holds it in that regard with basically no criticisms, like that's saying something.
Now, I do have a controversial question for you, though. This is very important. Now, Zion, you said you've played both the SNES and the later versions, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so with that in mind, which Frog translation is better?
Oh. So it's been so long since I've played the Super Nintendo version that I didn't realize that there was a big difference. But I think I was doing a bit of reading, and he has a different accent in the DS version. Is that correct or something? Or is it... Explain,
yes.
What happened?
I don't know the full history on this. I don't know what the translator's intention was or why they thought this was a great idea. Personally, I love it. Some people hate it. The original version of Frog on the SNES, and also on the PlayStation version... Or no, wait. When did they change the translation? Was it PlayStation or DS? I can't remember now.
I think it was DS.
Was it DS? Okay. In the original versions, Frog has this very over-the-top... I don't know the proper term for it. Shakespearean, maybe we'll say.
Yeah, I guess that's the term.
Yeah. Old-timey English. Just very, thou and shall, and just say, like, just that's his language the whole time. And then the DS version is a more faithful translation. This is close to the original, where he doesn't really have a strange accent. He didn't speak that way in the Japanese one. He just speaks like everyone else does. So one is more faithful to the original, but there's a certain character, especially with, again, if you back then, the other day, didn't know the difference, didn't know what it was supposed to be, you're just experiencing it the first time. Personally, I loved it. I mean, it was kind of dumb because no one in that time period spoke that way.
I was going to ask that, yeah. Like, why was he?
Yeah, no one else.
The only one. He turned into a frog, and
Just
now
frog.
suddenly he speaks like he's from a different world completely.
I think even in the Glen scenes, he speaks normal until he's transformed. Actually, now that you mention it.
Oh, really?
I never even considered this. Yeah.
I need to double check this now. I think while he's
Did we
Glen,
just discover
he
something?
doesn't speak that way. I have to double check this now because I don't remember.
That's great. That's so good.
It's a very important difference. That's like the biggest change they made to the core content in the DS one. Everything else is additional. As far as like core changes, that's like the one big change.
Okay.
As far as I recall.
Do we have time for the 3 trivia questions that I wrote down? Well, actually, you already named one of them anyways, Kevin, so it's just 2.
Nice.
Okay, sweet. So I wrote down 3 trivia questions. I'll just do all 3 of them anyways, so now Kevin just gets a free point. Anyways, and then if anyone has any final closing thoughts, we can still do that as well. But all right. Question 1. What is the true name of Frog? Just his first name.
Glenn!
Wow, John, how did you know? You probably knew already, but
I don't know.
ding ding. Yes, the correct answer is Glenn.
That's not my point.
What was I think you already said this as well. This was not part of it, but what is Glenn's friend? What's Glenn's friend's name? That
Like his mentor?
mhm. Yep, his mentor.
Oh, geez.
Now I got him.
He got us on the ropes.
Yeah, no, I'm a little rusty on that
I'm
one.
not sure.
I definitely knew it at some point, having played the game, but
Starts with a C.
Cyrus.
Look at you. See, I knew you could get there.
I just needed the little push.
So question 2. At one point in the game, Robo reconnects with potentially an old girlfriend, I'm assuming. What color is she? And a bonus point if you can guess her bow color.
Oh my god.
She was pink, right?
She was
Wasn't it
pink.
just, like over the top.
She was
Yeah,
pink.
it was like over
I
the
was
top. It's
thinking
the female
purple.
robot, so
No.
she's pink. Like it was very gendered.
But do either of you know what color her bow was?
Is it
Ooh.
red?
It is not red.
Okay. it's
That's
not
a
red.
great guess.
Is it? Oh, I'm really not sure on this one. That's a fine detail. I'm just to throw out yellow.
It's either I would have accepted blue, green, or teal. Or aqua.
Oh, I almost said green.
Any of that would have been fine.
I almost said green.
Darn. I'm glad that you
But-
were both so wrong, though. So that way it wasn't like a, you're kind of right, you know?
I was almost gonna cut you off too because I thought you were gonna have the trivia question be what's Robo's real name. Like it's kind of a theme with Frog and him, but
Does Robo has a, oh my goodness, when does that come up? I don't even remember that.
during his side quest, when he meets up with her, Mother Brain references him by his actual like whatever designated name, which I think is Prometheus.
That sounds, okay. I do remember that.
Yeah.
That was such a
It's very
sad
very
story.
literal,
mean-
very literary mythological reference going on.
Wow, goodness. Okay, so my last question.
I have to redeem myself. All right.
You got this, John. During what era of the game does the Wind Scene play? The song Wind Scene. Or it also goes by another name, which I can look up if you would like.
Wind Cry, which is Middle Ages.
It is Middle Ages. Oh my gosh, Kevin.
Okay.
It's
Got
my
them
favorite
all.
theme. It's my favorite song.
Well done. Thanks for coming along for the random impromptu.
I should just
totally
cut off.
had this
I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to take all of them. Should have given you a second.
It's all right. John knew all of them secretly.
Yeah, I was giving you a chance. Yeah. No.
Without the cheat sheet,
Yeah.
I didn't know any of them.
I'm not a regular guest. It's just you guys gave me the win and I appreciate that. I really needed this.
Well, since you won, I think your award should definitely be the closing statement.
As a closing statement, I feel like everything we've talked about for the last, what has this been, almost an hour and a half or something?
Yeah.
I think we have already sang the praises in every way we can. So instead, what I'm going to say is, I very much want you to now go play Chrono Cross, and we'll have a talk about that. Because that is a much more, as we've kind of said here, everyone who's played Chrono Trigger has very little in terms of criticism, whereas Chrono Cross is a much more divided field in commentary. There are people who love it, there are people who hate it, there are people who think it's whatever. It's a much more interesting, I think, dialogue space. It's not just a nonstop. It's great because this was so memorable. So now that you have this love of Trigger ingrained in you, I want to hear that follow up.
All right, so if Chrono Cross gets remastered, let's honestly, for the discussion's sake, let's just hope it doesn't get put on like PS5 or something big. Let's just hope it's a remaster, so that way we get like a great chance to talk about it. Otherwise, Kevin, you could bring us on to come chat on your channel since we're Nintendo focused. If it comes out, hit us up and we'll come chat about Chrono Cross.
Look, I want to start doing more game focused content, and a Chrono Cross remaster on Switch would absolutely be the kind of thing where I'd be like, all right, it's time.
Please.
That being said, if you do want to play it sooner, it's actually pretty accessible if you have access to like a PS3 or Vita.
Okay.
Because it's on the store still for PS1 classics.
I do have a physical copy.
Yeah.
I picked it up a few.
Oh, well, that too.
Yeah, a few years
That
ago.
also
I've got a nice black label with it's got the manual and everything. It's beautiful. All right. Well, I guess we've been chatting about Chrono Trigger for how long is how many different years do we how long does Chrono Trigger span? Is it like, I don't know, it's forever. It's the entire.
It's like a lot.
Yeah. That's how long we've been talking.
The prehistory goes like several million, so that kind of.
That's about how long we've been talking about Chrono Trigger. So we'll cut it off here. But thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on for this chat. I know I hit you up like just randomly and was like, he's not going to have time. He's going to be busy. But then you said yes, and I was like, I was the happiest person. I'm so glad.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me again, man. When you offered, I was like, oh, a chance to rant to like-minded people about my favorite game of all time? Sure.
And that was so nice.
Sounds like a party.
Flattered.
Let's
yeah.
do it.
And by the way, I assume everybody knows at this point. But what do you do again? What is it that you do on YouTube?
Who are you?
Because I feel like we glazed over that part.
I make videos about stuff. I don't know. It's all in flux. No, I do YouTube videos, mostly gaming hardware, but I also do lists. I'm very all over the place. Sometimes it's history, sometimes it's news, sometimes it's hardware reviews. It's all over the place. Lots of Switch stuff normally, though, just because that's what really blew up for me, so why not keep doing it? But yeah, I'm just a guy who likes games, and I like talking about it. So.
That's good. I think that's very evident. And I think, John and I, we've watched your videos before, and I can definitely say for myself, I love your videos. They're so well produced. But so if anyone,
thank you.
We will leave a link in the description down below to all of Kevin's socials. So please go follow him. And if you haven't already, go watch his videos. If you like our stuff, you'll love what Kevin does too.
They're way better. It's so much better than what we do.
The production quality is like, I'm like, how did he do this for like a GameCube controller?
Yeah, but in the time I make like one video, you guys have like 4 up. So
I mean, to each their own. But yours are like, I'm gonna pop a bottle of champagne and I'm gonna hang out and watch. This is a treat. Please let us know in the comments down below if you've played Chrono Trigger. Let us know maybe try to not be so spoiler heavy in the comments, so that way random people who need a bit more convincing have
Chrono dies.
Don't leave that in the comments. Don't do it. Don't do it. That was a huge moment for me. I was like, are you serious? He's not in the party anymore. What happened? But yeah, let us know your favorite Chrono Trigger comment. And honestly, anything you say about Chrono Trigger in the comments is probably just fine. Just go drop whatever you want. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, why don't you go ahead and travel back in time and press that subscribe button, so that way in the future we have more subscribers. That would be so nice. The number will just change right now. And ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we put up a new video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you guys for joining me for this chat. Thank you, John, as well. I didn't give you any praise, but you're a wonderful person. Don't forget that.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time.
Oh, Zion, there's a problem. We have no subscribers.
Oh no, it backfired.
What happened? Ah.